The war was over, and silence spread across the stars. Ships that once burned with fire now floated like broken bones in the endless black. Among the defeated was Princess Kayla, daughter of the proud warrior race called the Veari. Her people were known for strength, honor, and pride, but now their armies were crushed, their leaders forced to surrender. As punishment, Kayla was not imprisoned in chains, nor locked inside a cell. Her punishment was far worse in her eyes. She was bound to a human. To her people, humans were weak creatures, soft in body and fragile in spirit. To live under one was shame beyond imagination. Her captor, or perhaps her keeper, was not a cruel man. His name was Marcus, a human soldier who had fought in the war and survived when many did not. He was assigned to guard her, to live with her, and to ensure she could not return to her people. But Marcus did not treat her like a trophy of war. He gave her food, water, and a place to rest. He did not raise his voice, nor did he strike her when she glared at him with hatred. Kayla despised him. Every kindness he offered felt like an insult. She was a princess of warriors, yet she was forced to eat food given by the hands of an enemy. She swore to herself that she would never bend, never break, and never accept this fate. In the first nights, she refused his food. She sat with her arms crossed, her violet eyes burning with fury as Marcus placed a tray in front of her. "Eat," he said in a calm voice. "You need strength." "I would rather starve than eat what a human gives," she hissed. But hunger was a cruel master, and when her stomach twisted in pain, she broke her silent rebellion. The taste of the food filled her with shame, but her body betrayed her pride. Marcus never mocked her for it. He never smiled with victory when she finally ate. Instead, he only nodded as if it was nothing, and that infuriated her more. At night, she dreamed of escape. Her mind painted visions of stealing a weapon, striking Marcus down, and fleeing into the unknown. But when she looked at him as he slept near the fire, she saw no arrogance. His face carried scars, not only of battle, but of pain she could not understand. Why did he look like a man who carried grief heavier than her chains? The days passed, and her hatred did not weaken, but something inside her began to shift. Marcus spoke little, but when he did, his words were strange. He did not speak of conquest or victory. He asked her questions she had never expected from an enemy. "Do you miss your home? What was your world like before the war?" She refused to answer, turning her face away, but his voice lingered in her mind. It was not the voice of a conqueror, but of someone searching for something. One evening, as the twin moons rose above the horizon, Kayla tested her chains. They were not made of metal, but of technology, an energy band wrapped around her wrist, glowing faintly blue. The bond connected her to Marcus. If she strayed too far, the band would pull her back. It was the symbol of her punishment, the symbol of her humiliation. She pulled against it, rage in her heart. But Marcus only looked at her with steady eyes. "You will break yourself before you break that," he said, not with mockery, but with quiet truth. "I will never stop trying," she snapped. "Then you are stronger than most," he replied, and walked away, leaving her stunned. Kayla could not understand him. Why did he not treat her as a prisoner? Why did his words sometimes feel like respect instead of command? Her heart warred with itself, torn between fury and a strange, unwanted curiosity. But she made a vow. She would not allow herself to weaken. She would find a way to escape. And if escape was impossible, she would find a way to make him suffer. For now, she would play the part of the obedient captive, waiting for her chance. Yet deep inside, a shadow of doubt grew in her heart. Every time she looked at Marcus, she saw something she could not explain, and in that mystery, her future began to change. The captive beginning had started, and neither Kayla nor Marcus could imagine how this forced bond would transform into something far beyond punishment. Kayla woke each day with fire in her heart. She told herself she would never bow, never bend, and never see a human as anything more than an enemy. Every morning was a battle, not with weapons, but with words, glares, and silence sharper than any blade. Marcus would offer her food, water, and simple kindness, and she would refuse, daring him to lose patience. But he never did. When he placed a tray of bread and fruit before her, she knocked it aside, the food scattering on the floor. Her eyes gleamed with pride, certain that at last he would raise his voice, perhaps strike her, show the cruelty she expected. But Marcus only sighed, knelt, and gathered the pieces back into the tray. "You waste your own strength," he said quietly, "not mine." His calmness stung worse than any punishment. Kayla began to test him. She insulted him in her language, calling humans weaklings and cowards. She spoke of the very victories of the past, of battles where her people crushed human forces with ease. She expected anger, but Marcus never answered with rage. At most, he gave her a look of sorrow, as though he carried wounds deeper than her words could reach. That look unsettled her, and she hated that it did. One day, she tried something new. When Marcus turned his back, she leapt at him with a shard of stone she had sharpened in secret. The edge barely cut the air before his hand caught her wrist. In one swift motion, he disarmed her, not with violence, but with precision. He held her arm still, his grip firm, but not crushing. "Is this all you are?" he asked, his voice low. "A princess who strikes from the shadows?" Kayla froze, her pride burning as if he had struck her heart. When he released her, she expected chains, beatings, or threats, but he simply walked away, leaving her trembling in her own fury. That night she could not sleep. Her people had taught her that humans were selfish, brutal, and weak. But Marcus was none of these, and the contradiction clawed at her mind. She told herself she hated him, yet his refusal to punish her unsettled her more than any cruelty could have. The bond around her wrist glowed faintly as she stared at it. The energy thread stretched toward Marcus, who sat by the fire in silence, mending a torn strap of armor. It was this bond that tied them together, a chain that humiliated her each time she felt its pull. Yet it was also a chain that saved her. For when soldiers passed near their shelter, suspicious of her presence, Marcus stood in front of her, hand on his weapon. "This one is under my guard," he told them firmly. "She is no threat unless you make her one." The soldiers grumbled, muttering about killing the alien before she caused trouble. But Marcus's steady gaze silenced them, and they moved on. Kayla could hardly breathe. Why had he defended her? He had no reason to risk himself, yet he did. The next day, she confronted him. "Why?" she demanded. "Why protect me when you should want me dead?" Marcus looked at her for a long moment before answering. "Because I have seen enough death," he said simply, and turned away. The words struck her harder than any blade. In that moment, she saw not an enemy soldier, but a man burdened with pain. Kayla tried to hold on to her hatred. She told herself it was all a trick, a human trap to break her will. So she pushed harder. She stopped walking when he led her through the forest paths, forcing him to drag her forward. She shouted curses at him until her voice broke. She even threw herself into the mud one night, refusing to move unless he carried her. To her shock, Marcus did just that. He lifted her in his arms without a word, carried her through the rain, and set her down near the fire. He did not mock her, nor show anger. He simply covered her with a blanket and sat in silence, his eyes reflecting the flames. Kayla stared at him with disbelief. She wanted to hate him more, but hatred alone no longer filled her heart. There was confusion now, a dangerous confusion. Because every time she expected him to act like the monster her people described, he proved her wrong. The days stretched on, and the clash between them continued. A war of pride and patience, of fury against quiet strength. But in the cracks of that war, something unspoken began to grow. Kayla did not admit it, not even to herself. Yet when she closed her eyes at night, her thoughts were no longer only of escape. They were of Marcus, of the mystery in his eyes, of the pain he carried, and of the question that haunted her. Why did her heart hesitate when it should only hate? The battle between them was far from over. But in the silence of the firelight, Kayla realized the truth. This bond was not breaking her. It was changing her, slowly, in ways she did not yet understand. The rain had fallen for 3 days, flooding the camp where Marcus and Kayla stayed. The shelter they used was no longer safe, the roof leaking, the ground soaked, and the fire weak. Marcus decided they had to move, but Kayla resisted. She crossed her arms and glared at him. "I will not march through the storm like a slave," she said. Marcus did not argue. He only tightened his cloak and said, "Then you will drown here." He turned and began walking, and the energy bond pulled at her wrist, forcing her to follow. Every step filled her with rage, but the storm left her no choice. The path led them into the dense alien jungle, a place full of strange sounds and shadows. Trees glowed faintly with bioluminescent light, and unseen creatures hissed from the darkness. Kayla felt a shiver run through her, though she would never admit fear. She tried to fall back, hoping the jungle would swallow her, but the bond pulled her closer to Marcus. Each tug reminded her she was tied to him, dependent on his path. As the night deepened, a roar shattered the air. From the undergrowth, a beast lunged, its body scaled, its teeth sharp as blades. Kayla froze, her warrior training buried beneath exhaustion and hunger. But Marcus moved with speed, drawing his weapon and firing a burst of energy into the beast's side. The creature screamed, thrashing, and turned toward him. Marcus shouted, "Move!" But Kayla stood frozen, her pride battling with her fear. The beast lunged at her, but Marcus pushed her aside, taking the strike on his arm. Pain flashed across his face, but he raised his weapon again and struck the creature down. The jungle fell silent, except for his ragged breath. Kayla stared at him, stunned. She had tried to betray him before, had tried to strike him down, yet here he was, bleeding because he saved her. Her pride screamed at her to look away, to ignore it, but her eyes betrayed her. She saw his blood staining the ground, saw the way he held himself firm despite the pain. For the first time, her hatred faltered. They moved again, Marcus limping slightly. Kayla found herself walking closer to him, though she told herself it was only because of the bond. When he stumbled, she reached out without thinking, steadying him. The moment her hand touched his arm, heat rushed through her, and she quickly pulled away. But the memory of that touch lingered. Later, when they found a small cave for shelter, Marcus collapsed against the wall, his face pale. Kayla sat across from him, watching, torn between anger and something unfamiliar. He said nothing, simply tied a cloth around his wound, his hands shaking. Her warrior's instinct told her he might not survive the night without help. Her pride told her to let him suffer, to let him pay for the shame of binding her. But another voice whispered that without him, she would be alone in this deadly world. That thought unsettled her more than the storm outside. She crawled closer, taking the cloth from his trembling hands. "Your work is sloppy," she muttered, and pressed the fabric firmly against his wound. Marcus looked at her, surprise flickering in his tired eyes. "You help me?" he asked softly. "Do not mistake this for kindness," she snapped. "If you die, I die too." But her hands betrayed her words, steady and careful as she bound his arm. In truth, she did not know why she was helping, only that something inside her demanded it. As the night dragged on, Marcus fell into uneasy sleep. Kayla sat awake, listening to the rain hammer the cave mouth. She glanced at him again and again, trying to understand the confusion in her heart. Why did she care if he lived or died? Why did his quiet strength unsettle her so deeply? She told herself it was weakness, but the truth pressed harder each time she looked at him. When dawn came, Marcus stirred, his face pale but alive. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice rough. Kayla turned her head away, refusing to meet his gaze. "Save your words, human," she muttered. But her heart beat faster than it ever had before. The journey through the jungle continued, and with each step, the distance between them grew smaller. Not because of the bond alone, but because Kayla found herself walking beside him rather than behind. When danger stirred in the shadows, she reached for her blade without thinking, standing at his side. When he faltered from weakness, she slowed her pace to match his. And when silence fell between them, it was no longer filled with hatred alone. It carried questions, unspoken, dangerous questions. She still told herself she would never accept him, never bow to him, never care for him. But in the dark of the jungle, after blood and storms, the truth had begun to root in her heart. The truth that frightened her more than chains. The truth that she was no longer only bound by the energy band on her wrist. She was bound by something she did not yet understand. The jungle air grew heavy as days turned into weeks. Kayla and Marcus walked side by side, the bond at their wrists glowing faintly like a reminder that neither of them could escape. They spoke little, but silence between them was no longer only sharp with hatred. There were moments when Kayla almost forgot she was his captive, moments when she caught herself watching him with a curiosity she could not explain. One night, under the silver light of twin moons, Kayla woke to the sound of a voice. She turned her head and saw Marcus sitting near the fire, his back bent, his hands clasped together. At first she thought he was speaking to her, but soon she realized his voice was too soft, too private. He was whispering into the night as if talking to ghosts. She strained to hear, and the words drifted to her ears. "I hope you're at peace now," he murmured, his eyes fixed on the flames. "I couldn't save you, I tried. Gods know I tried, but the fire took everything." Kayla frowned, unsure who he spoke of. Then he pulled a small object from his pocket, a broken locket, and held it in his palm. Inside was a faded picture of a woman and a child, both smiling, their faces frozen in a moment of joy long gone. Kayla's breath caught. This was his family. The realization struck her harder than any battle wound. His wife and child, taken from him in the war. Her people's war. For the first time, Kayla felt the sting of guilt, sharp and burning. The enemy she had sworn to hate was a man who had already lost everything. Marcus's voice trembled as he continued. "I carry you with me," he whispered, "but I can't carry the hate anymore. It's killing me." He closed the locket and pressed it against his chest, his shoulders heavy with sorrow. Kayla watched silently, unable to turn away. Her chest ached with something she didn't understand, a pain that was not her own, but felt as if it belonged to her. She remembered her people's words, the way they called humans weak. But what she saw in Marcus was not weakness. It was strength, the strength to endure loss and still stand, the strength to carry pain without letting it poison his heart. Her warrior pride had no answer for that. The next morning, Kayla pretended she had heard nothing, but the image of the locket burned in her mind. When Marcus walked ahead, she followed quietly, no longer pulling at the bond. When he stumbled from his healing wound, she steadied him without thinking. Each act felt like a betrayal of her vow to hate him, yet she could not stop herself. That evening, as they set camp by a river, Kayla finally spoke, her voice low. "Your family," she said, "they were taken in the war." Marcus froze, his hand tightening on a locket. "You were awake," he said softly, not with anger, but with quiet acceptance. Kayla looked away, ashamed of listening, yet unable to deny what she had heard. "I did not know," she whispered. "You weren't meant to," he replied, his eyes fixed on the water. "It changes nothing, but did change something. It changed everything inside her." Kayla wanted to argue, to remind him that she was his prisoner, that she owed him nothing. Yet the words would not come. Instead, she asked a question she never thought she would ask. "Why did you protect me? When the soldiers wanted to kill me, when the beast attacked, why?" Marcus turned to her, his gaze steady. "Because I don't want more blood on my hands," he said. "I've lost enough." The honesty in his voice struck her like a blade. There was no trick, no hidden motive, only truth. And Kayla hated that truth because it made her heart betray her pride. She told herself it was weakness, but when she looked at Marcus, she did not see weakness. She saw a man who had every reason to hate her, yet chose not to, and that unsettled her more than chains ever could. That night, sleep refused to come. Kayla lay awake, staring at the bond around her wrist, its glow faint but steady. It no longer felt like a chain of humiliation, but something else, something she feared to name. When she closed her eyes, she did not dream of escape. She dreamed of Marcus's face, of the sorrow in his eyes, and of the locket he held to his heart. By the next dawn, Kayla knew something dangerous had begun. The wall of hate she built inside her was cracking, and in the cracks, something unspoken was growing. Something she could not allow, yet could not stop. She walked beside Marcus that morning without a word. For the first time, not as a prisoner dragged by chains, but as someone who had seen the truth hidden beneath his silence. And that truth would haunt her with every step. The days after Kayla learned of Marcus's secret were different. She tried to act the same, tried to hold her pride like a shield, but something had changed inside her. Every time she looked at him, she saw not only the enemy soldier, but the man who carried ghosts. The locket he held, the sorrow in his eyes, those things stayed with her even when she wanted to forget. She walked beside him more often now, not trailing behind with anger. When the path grew rough, she steadied him without waiting for him to stumble. When silence stretched between them, it was no longer heavy with hate, but filled with unspoken questions. Kayla hated herself for it. Yet at the same time, she felt a strange calm she could not name. One evening, the two of them reached a canyon, wide and deep, with only a narrow bridge of vines to cross. The storm winds howled, shaking the bridge, making it sway like a living thing. Marcus studied it carefully, his jaw tight. "It will hold," he said, though Kayla saw the tension in his face. She smirked. "Afraid, human?" "Only careful," he answered, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. Kayla stepped onto the bridge first, her warrior balance steady despite the swaying vines. She glanced back and saw Marcus hesitate at the edge, his knuckles white around the rope. For the first time, she saw him vulnerable. The soldier who fought beasts and storms was afraid of falling into the endless dark below. Something shifted in her heart. Without thinking, she extended her hand across the swaying gap. "Take it," she said, her voice steady. Marcus stared at her, surprised, but then he gripped her hand tightly, his weight grounding against hers. Step by step they crossed together, her strength guiding his fear. When they reached the other side, Marcus let go, his face calm, but his eyes grateful. "Thank you," he whispered. Kayla turned away quickly, hiding the warmth that spread through her chest. "You would have fallen without me," she said sharply. But her words could not cover the truth. From that moment, something between them cracked open. The walls Kayla built began to crumble, brick by brick. They started to share more than silence. Marcus showed her how humans hunted with traps, and Kayla showed him how to move like a warrior through shadows. Together, they built fires faster, found shelter quicker, and fought as if they had trained side by side for years. One night, a storm thundered above their cave, rain hammering like drums. Lightning split the sky, flashing bright against the walls. Kayla noticed Marcus staring into the fire, his body rigid, his breath uneven. "Are you afraid of storms?" she asked, half mocking, half curious. Marcus shook his head, but his eyes betrayed the truth. "My child, she hated storms," he said softly. "Every time the thunder came, she would run to me, and I promised her nothing would hurt her while I was there." His voice broke, and Kayla felt her throat tighten. Without thinking, she reached across the space and placed her hand on his shoulder. "You cannot fight the storm," she whispered, "but you fought everything else." Marcus closed his eyes, the tension in him loosening. For the first time, Kayla saw fear in him, not the fear of battle, but the fear of memory. And for the first time, she chose not to mock it, not to use it as a weapon. Instead, she offered her presence, quiet and steady, like a shield. After that night, their bond felt different. When they walked, they no longer pulled against the chain, but moved together. When danger struck, they fought not as captor and captive, but as allies. Each saved the other more than once. And in those moments of survival, unspoken trust began to bloom. Kayla still told herself she did not care. But when she saw Marcus wounded by a creature's claws, she rushed to his side faster than she thought possible. Her hand shook as she pressed against the wound, shouting, "Stay awake, you stubborn human." And when his eyes opened weakly, she felt a relief so deep it frightened her. Later, as the firelight flickered, Marcus looked at her with a faint smile. "You're not as cold as you pretend," he said, his voice weak but teasing. Kayla turned her face away, hiding the heat that rose to her cheeks. "Do not mistake necessity for care," she muttered. But inside, she knew the truth. The walls she once thought unbreakable were falling, piece by piece. And what replaced them was something she did not dare name. For Kayla had been forced into this bond against her will. Yet now she was beginning to see that she no longer walked because of chains. She walked because of him, and that realization terrified her more than any battle ever could. The jungle thinned as days passed, giving way to cliffs and broken plains. Kayla and Marcus walked side by side, no longer enemies in silence, but companions in survival. Though neither spoke of it aloud, both knew something had changed. Kayla no longer dreamed only of escape, and Marcus no longer treated her as a burden. The bond that once chained them now felt like a thread pulling them together. But peace was short-lived. On the horizon, Kayla spotted movement, shadows with familiar armor, the soldiers of her own people. Her heart froze, for these were not rescuers, they were hunters. The Vayari Council had declared her a traitor for living under human guard. They would not free her, they would destroy her. When Marcus saw them, he placed his hand on his weapon and turned to her. "They're coming for you," he said, his voice steady. "They're coming for us," Kayla corrected, for she knew the truth. If the soldiers saw her at Marcus's side, they would kill him first. Her chest tightened, torn between blood loyalty and the strange bond she now carried. The soldiers advanced, shouting in her language, calling her by her title. "Princess Kayla, step away from the human. Your honor will be restored if you return with us." Her body trembled at the sound, memories of her people's pride filling her mind. For a heartbeat, she imagined walking toward them, lifting her head high, reclaiming her place as a daughter of warriors. But then she glanced at Marcus, his eyes calm, yet prepared. He was ready to die fighting for her, though he had no reason. And in that instant, the choice was clear. "No," she whispered, then louder, "no." She drew her blade and stepped to Marcus's side. The soldiers froze in shock, their eyes wide. One shouted, "You would fight against your own kind for him?" Kayla's grip tightened on her weapon, her voice steady. "He is not my captor," she declared. "He is my shield, and I am his." The battle erupted, steel clashing with energy, shouts echoing across the plains. Marcus fought with precision, his movements sharp despite the wounds he carried. Kayla fought like the warrior princess she was born to be, her blade cutting through the air with deadly grace. For the first time, they fought not against each other, but as one, their movements flowing together like water. He covered her flank. She struck down enemies at his back. Every strike, every breath, every heartbeat tied them closer. But the enemy numbers were great. Blades cut across Marcus's arm, blood flowing, yet he stood firm. A spear grazed Kayla's shoulder, but she pushed through, fury burning in her veins. She realized with shock that her rage was not for her pride, not for her people. It was for Marcus, for the thought of losing him. As the last soldier fell, silence returned, broken only by the sound of rain on the plains. Kayla stood panting, her chest heaving, her blade dripping red. Marcus dropped to one knee, blood staining his side. Kayla rushed to him, catching his weight before he fell. "Stay with me," she begged, her voice cracking. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered with a faint smile, though his eyes were heavy. She pressed her forehead against his, trembling. "You fool," she whispered. "You fought for me when you didn't have to. And you fought for me when you could have left," he answered softly. Her throat tightened, tears stinging her eyes, though she tried to hide them. For the first time, she admitted what her heart already knew. She could no longer see him as the enemy. That night, she tended his wounds by the fire, her hands gentle, her eyes never leaving his face. Marcus drifted in and out of sleep, his breathing shallow but steady. Kayla sat beside him, her blade across her knees, guarding him as he had always guarded her. She whispered words she had never thought she would say. "You are not my punishment," she confessed into the night. "You are my choice." The turning point had come. The princess who once swore to hate the human now vowed silently to protect him. Whatever lay ahead, enemy blades, betrayal, or death, she knew she would not walk away. Not from him, not from the bond that had become more than chains. It had become her heart. The battle on the plains had left scars. The earth was stained with blood, the air heavy with the smell of smoke and iron. Marcus lay weak but alive, his wounds bound by Kayla's careful hands. She had fought her own people to stand by him, and there was no going back. In the days that followed, they moved slowly, their steps measured, their strength tested with every mile. Kayla carried more weight than before, not because of the bond, but because she chose to. When Marcus faltered, she steadied him. When he grew silent, she filled the air with her voice. It was strange for her, a princess once taught that humans were nothing, now guarding one with her own life. At night, when the fire flickered low, Marcus would watch her sharpen her blade. He would see not the prisoner he was ordered to guard, but the fierce warrior who had stood against her own kind for him. Sometimes his lips parted as if to speak, but the words never came. And Kayla, though silent, felt those words in the space between them. One evening, as the sky turned gold with the setting sun, Marcus finally spoke. "You had a chance to leave me," he said, his voice rough. "Why didn't you take it?" Kayla paused, her hand stilling on the blade. She could have lied, could have spoken of duty or necessity, but her pride no longer held the same chains. "Because I didn't want to," she whispered, her eyes meeting his. "I thought I hated you, but I was wrong." Marcus's breath caught, and for the first time since she had known him, he looked unguarded. "You don't mean that," he said softly, almost afraid to believe. But Kayla moved closer, her hand reaching for his, the bond between them glowing faintly, as if it sensed her choice. "I was forced to be here," she said, her voice firm, "but I stay because I choose to." The silence between them shifted, heavy not with hate, but with something deeper. Kayla had never spoken such words in her life, not to her people, not even to herself. Her world had been built on pride, on loyalty to blood, but all of it had crumbled when faced with the man before her. She had seen his pain, his strength, his mercy, and in those things she found something greater than honor. She found love. That night, as the stars filled the sky, Marcus sat beside her, their shoulders brushing. No chains held them now, though the bond still glowed faintly. It felt different, no longer a symbol of punishment, but a thread chosen by both. "I thought I had nothing left," Marcus admitted quietly, "but you've proven me wrong." Kayla turned to him, her eyes shining. "And I thought humans were weak, yet you've shown me what true strength is." The journey continued, but it no longer felt like survival. It felt like destiny, two souls once bound by war, now bound by choice. When enemies appeared, they faced them together, their blades and hearts in unison. When storms raged, they endured them side by side. And when silence came, it was no longer heavy, but peaceful. In time, Kayla stopped thinking of herself as a captive. She stopped dreaming of escape, for she had already found freedom. Not freedom from the bond, but freedom from the chains of hate that once ruled her heart. And Marcus, who once carried only ghosts, now carried hope again, hope born from the warrior who chose him. Their story was no longer one of punishment. It was a story of love beyond measure, forged in fire, pain, and trust. Kayla looked at Marcus one evening as the firelight painted his face, and she whispered words that sealed her vow. "I was forced to live with you once," she said, "but now, even if given every choice in the galaxy, I would still choose you." Marcus's eyes softened, his hand tightening around hers. "And I would choose you again and again," he answered. The bond on their wrists pulsed gently, no longer chains but a symbol of what they had become. Not captor and captive, not enemies, but something greater. Together, they rose to face whatever the galaxy would throw their way. No longer divided by war, no longer broken by loss. For what began as chains of punishment had transformed into a love that nothing could shatter. A love beyond measure.